Hi, I'm Jake Smith on the Delmarva Peninsula. Welcome to Boardwalk Potatoes, joined by Bill Colley, my podcasting colleague from Twin Falls, Idaho. Good morning to you, William.
Good morning to you. I would imagine that we don't really have to discuss a whole lot about what we're talking about today.
No, Bill, I to be honest with you, I feel like the entire week, my mind, my whole body's been in a fog, even before the election. But having said that, and I'm still getting today, I'm not doing my radio show on Saturday, nor am I doing it on Sunday, but I'm still getting considerable email traffic today. I got an email just a little while ago from a listener who was sitting having dinner here in Delaware, but was listening to a conversation going on at the next table where some woman from Pennsylvania came down from the weekend and was crowing about the fact that her mother had been dead for years. She got a ballot, filled it out for Joe Biden and the Democrats and mailed it in. Not any concern that what she was doing was criminal in nature. But right now, what we have two things as far as I can see. First of all, we have what is the destruction of the credibility of elections in this constitutional republic. I don't know about you. I think half the country does not trust our electoral process right now. How that can be fixed, rebuilt, is anyone's guess. But now, as of last night, Justice Alito is involved. The Supreme Court is now involved. I don't expect President Trump to win in the courts because, quite frankly, we never win in the courts. We always lose in the courts. Well, I shouldn't say that. Bush v. Gore 2000, we won in the courts. But then again, I really, at this point, George W. Bush was not in the position that he had the constitutional republic and the future of the constitutional republic on his back. This president does. This is a very fractured nation. This is an election in the middle of a civil war, which is going to get a lot worse. Bill, what do you think?
Of course, if it was the other way around, you'd be hearing the mainstream media machine and all of its allies just screaming and yelling about the end. But as long as it's their guy, they're not really concerned that this might be a threat to the republic. They've been threatening it anyway with court packing ideas and adding states. I remember back in 2012, Mitt Romney lost Philadelphia, and when they finished counting the votes, he essentially got none.
Right.
Now, that was 8 years ago. So we're well aware that this has been going on, and you look at these cities where this took place. This happened. All of a sudden, voting comes to a stop, and then all of a sudden, the truckload starts showing up, overwhelmingly with Biden votes.
Right.
And that's now I realize in some of the big cities he may do very well. This has been rife for abuse since we went down this route of mail-in voting. Frank Miali, who was a newspaper editor for many, many years at something called the Daily Interlake in Kalispell, Montana. That's not a very big community, but Frank developed a national reputation, and he has a column at Real Clear Politics where he calls this the Kafka election. And he goes into some of the detail. People that keep saying, where's your evidence when we try to make these arguments? But he's trying to break this down, that this has been a long planned, well, they've covered their tracks well. But he says this: the Supreme Court could step in and invalidate the presidential election results and say, here's a day, you're going to have a do-over on this day. And that means people will show up in person and vote on that day, because there are so many irregularities because of problems with machines and mail-in and just votes popping up left and right, that you can almost say, look, we can't get to the bottom of just how many of these are phony. So what we have to do is do it all over again. So there is a possibility. That seems remote, but that could happen.
I don't see that happening, Bill. I really don't. As much as I think that is the only way to get to the bottom of who is the true winner in this contest, I think what we have here right now, tell me if I'm wrong, with obviously the states have the rights to create their own election law. The legislators in states, they're the ones that vote on their election law. But we have what we have. We have what we've been given. This is a fractured nation. I don't understand. Well, let's put it this way. I don't see how a strong union can continue in this regard when you have this kind of funny business going on. And I've had people emailing me today saying, I'm done with voting. And my response is to both people this morning was, that's exactly what George Soros wanted and expected you to say. Bill, I just think that this nation's been fractured. We now have a candidate who could become president. that is owned by the communist Chinese, the comms, so to speak. What do you think? I mean, are we heading towards a massive split in this republic? I think we are.
Well, and he's not just owned by the Chinese, he's a nitwit.
Joe Biden is a dummy.
Yeah, you said it well.
He certainly is. And we know him, don't we? Because Delaware, you're a past Delawarean. I live in Delaware. We know him better than anybody. He is a nitwit, always has been.
This is, you realize the elites and media, deep state all went along with this, knowing these terrible flaws that this man brings to this, which shows you that the level of their desperation and just the level of treason, that hundreds of thousands of people are guilty of it at the moment.
Yep.
You say, how can the republic survive? I floated an idea on air yesterday. You simply tell all of these blue areas, which are mainly urban.
Right.
You tell them they've got independent status. You give them access, as you know, we had Autobahn access to West Berlin during the Cold War. You
Right.
tell them that they can have goods shipped in and out on the interstates, but you essentially let the rest of us go our own way and they go their way. I'll tell you what, in 5 to 10
I agree. I think that's where we're heading.
they'll be begging to rejoin us. They'll be begging because they'll have exhausted, with all of their big social programs, the Ponzi schemes that they run with public pensions and the like. They'll have exhausted everything they have, and then they're going to have to come to us and ask for, please get us out of this, is what they'll be asking.
Bill, how do they justify what they did to John James, a very good candidate who would have represented his district very well? John James was the winner of that contest. He is not going to be representing his district from the Detroit area. How did they rationalize in their own minds doing this to an African American who just doesn't follow the rules of the modern plantation? What do you think?
I'll give you an example. I don't believe that they have any notion of a judgment day, because they don't really have what we used to call a good Christian formation. I think back to Harry Reid. Now, Harry Reid is a member of the LDS Church, but he's a convert. It benefited Harry Reid politically to be a convert in Nevada because it's a heavily LDS state. It benefited him. But was Harry Reid ever really serious about it? No. It just was, at the time, it allowed him to pick up a lot.
LDS people don't go public and accuse someone of not paying their taxes when they know it's a lie. That is not something a real follower of the Church of Latter-day Saints would ever do. Harry Reid,
Right.
Dingy Harry, was never that way, obviously.
And he did it for expediency, suddenly put on the cloak of faith. He did it for expediency. Then he turned around when he was confronted about the lie years later and said, we won, didn't we?
Yeah.
And it shows you that since they don't believe in any, that they have a moral relativism. They don't believe in a judgment. They obviously don't believe in an almighty judge or right and wrong. So to them, the ends justify the means, or is that the way that works?
Yes,
Right?
that's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, I've had a number of priests and religious contacting me recently about what's going on. The situation with the Pope, I cannot believe what my own pastor said about this. He told all of us in the church not to listen to this Pope, to just go on with your own faith, your own souls, caring for your soul, caring for others. Go on with the teachings of the church. Do not listen to this Pope. Bill, there's a chastisement going on throughout the world right now. It's happening, whether we like it or not. We thought we would be shielded from that chastisement, one nation under God, but clearly that chastisement is also affecting the United States of America. Question is, as St. Teresa always says, there's grace in everything, even in the bad stuff. There's grace in everything. What good do you see coming out of this? And this chastisement is part of what we see going on in our country. How do we fight back for our God?
It's interesting you bring this up because I stopped to see a friend of mine. He was in a state legislative race here. He lost his race. He was running on a minor party line, but he's the pastor of a Southern Baptist church. I stopped to see him the day before Election Day,
Right.
and I referenced what's going on with Pope Francis, and I said, we're headed towards schism. And he said, well, my denomination is headed towards schism too, meaning Southern Baptists. So it's happening everywhere. And this is a sign that these institutions are failing us. And so we've got, I think what we're looking at.
Are they failing us or are they failing God, Bill?
Both. But a lot of this may be our responsibility too, as well, because
Yeah,
we've stood
agreed,
by
agreed.
quietly through much of this without, well, we were, if you tried to raise your voice, of course, you could lose your job or social status, all these things people were worried about, which the early martyrs never were worried about. They were like, well, I may die, but I'm going to stick with God. I think that we're headed towards something akin to a Babylonian captivity. Nobody's going to come and likely drag us away, but we're going to go through a very difficult time in this country.
Well, we're
See,
going to be in internment camps, Bill. That's what it's going to be. They're going to set up camps for us where we can go certain places where we're welcome and we're canceled in other places. That's what they've been setting up with this cancel culture. We'll be able to go somewhere in certain places. We'll be unwelcome in other places. I call that an internment camp, and that's what they are planning on setting up. We're not welcome in certain places.
I would agree. I feel somewhat sheltered where I live, but I also I deal with a lot of people in government, even though I'm in supposedly one of the reddest states in the union.
Oh, me too. You know that. Yeah.
I still am surrounded by a lot of people who call themselves Republicans, but tell you what, they wouldn't they wouldn't lift a finger in that situation to make it, as long as they would check the direction of the wind with the wet finger, see which way it was going, and then come down on that side. And that's the problem. We have a lot of what I'd call sunshine patriots and fair weather friends.
And here's the problem that the Republican Party has right now. And I said this on my radio show yesterday, with the exception of President Trump, perhaps Tom Cotton. There aren't many Republicans that Republican voters would say, he has my back, she has my back, because they're just, as you know, the fair weather variety. President Trump had our backs. There's no question about it. Tom Cotton has our backs. I never trusted Lindsey Graham. I don't care how much money he gave to the Trump Legal Defense Fund. I don't trust Lindsey Graham. And it looks like he may lose his chairmanship of the Judiciary Committee, the way things are going. Do the Republicans have some major repairing of their relationship? In other words, if your party doesn't feel that, the voters don't feel you've got their back, especially when a lot of you when they found out that a pandemic was coming back in January, they didn't call their districts first, they called their stockbrokers first. And there's a senator in Georgia right now that is at risk for losing her seat, who was one of those who did that. That's not somebody who can say, I've got your back, because they can't prove it. What do you think about that, Bill?
Yeah, you're referencing Kelly Loeffler.
Correct.
Who may end up giving control of the Senate away because of her incompetence. Well, first of all, these Lincoln Project guys, Rick Wilson and the gang, they got to go. We've got to, as a larger group, grassroots group, drum them out of the movement and just tell them, be gone with you. Secondly, I think we can rebuild this movement, though, quickly. And President Trump isn't going to go away. He's going to remain a lightning rod over the next 4 years. And while he may not run again, I truly believe that we've got a guy waiting in the wings for the last decade by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. He's the chairman of the Republican Party in the state of Texas.
Of Alan West. Hero,
Great
American hero.
American hero, great leader of men. There's a guy, and somebody said to me, well, Ted Cruz from Texas. No. I like Ted, but Ted isn't what you'd call a charismatic figure. And that's what you need right now. You need someone who can step into that void, and a leader that says, follow me. And that leader is out front. And that's a guy like Colonel West.
I saw your suggestion on that early this week. I thought that was a great suggestion. But, I had replayed or rebroadcast a segment that I do in my show every day called Salute the Troops. We salute a service member who's living, died in action, whatever. We salute that service member. And in honor of Election Day, I rebroadcast one that I produced on George Washington, the only 6-star general in the United States in U.S. history. And Washington was very unique in that when he was commanding forces against the British, he didn't fight the British at every opportunity. He picked and he chose which battles he knew that they would win. And I think going into the next 4 years, that's what we need to do. We've got to look at the battles that we know we can win and then gain our momentum that way. Don't just go off half-cocked at every opportunity, because quite frankly, we're going to need to focus. You want to call it intense intervention, whatever you want to call it. But as George Washington was noted during the Revolutionary War, he didn't want to waste time on battles that he knew he wasn't going to win. And perhaps we could learn something from Washington's leadership.
Bruce Chadwick, who is a biographer of Washington, and Bruce lives over in New Jersey, used to be a regular guest on one of my old radio shows.
Yeah.
He wrote a couple of books about Washington, and Bruce is. I had a good relationship with him because he was a graduate of Syracuse University, and I had relatives who graduated there, and so we would chatter about a lot of the minutiae related to that. But Bruce says he told the story one time in one of his books, and he shared it with me on air as well. Washington at the end of the war, you've got a lot of his officers who feel that they haven't gotten paid what they were promised, and they're about ready to mutiny. So Washington comes to address them. This was in Connecticut. He comes to address them, and he walks into the room, and he pulls out a paper. He wants to read them something, and then he stops, and he starts fumbling for his glasses. And he makes a comment about how his health, at 8 years away from home, leading this war effort, how his health has started to fail him. And he fumbles, pulls out the glasses, and he puts them on. And that's when the other officers suddenly realize what this guy has given the revolution.
Yeah.
And they're worried about a few dollars, and they realize this guy has given up his years of his life that he could have spent just happily with his feet up on his plantation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a great point. I got information last night that there is going to be a major investigation of election fraud, massive election fraud here in Delaware, the first state, massive election fraud. And we're just going to have to see how it plays out. Bill, we're seeing these reports come up all over the country. My last question, I received a number of phone calls from listeners yesterday that reported to reading, hearing, watching video that this whole attempted theft of an election by the Socialist Democrats was a sting operation. That's why we haven't heard from William Barr in the last 6 weeks, that ballots were watermarked to see where they're going, and the fact that that's why President Trump, you don't see him very angry about this, because they're going to pay for what they've done, and the phony results of this election are going to be overturned. I had so many calls on this yesterday. I haven't been able to verify anything. Have you heard anything about that? Anyone to your show yesterday reported or talk about that?
Watermark came up briefly, and I've been reading some of the stories on that, where essentially it was reading Republican ballots as Democrat ballots.
Correct.
There's an old episode of The Simpsons where Homer's trying to vote, and every time he picks his candidate, the machine switches it to the other. And it's a little bit like that. If that's the case, and they come out and they reveal this in the next few days, this is going to be devastating to the Democrats, to the deep state, to mainstream media.
If that's the case, they are finished.
And by the way, in Delaware, the election fraud there, remember who runs that state, what family runs that state. This has been going on. I remember a story.
Nothing new.
2010, when Christine O'Donnell lost a Senate race to Chris Coons, a local restaurant owner.
I don't want to hear that name anymore. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Local restaurant owner in Rehoboth Beach told me, he said, I used to live in Wilmington before I bought the restaurant here. And he said, I was looking over some of the districts in Wilmington, what they were reporting. He said, one of them was a warehouse district, and it reported thousands of votes for the Democrat. And he said, there aren't that many people living there. Even if you were to count their children aren't going to vote. But even if you counted their children, there aren't that many people there.
Right.
So this is not uncommon, and that they're just an extension of the Philadelphia machine as well.
Oh, there's no question about it. And the final point that I want to make is the only good thing right now that we have to think about is that if Biden does win, God forbid, and Biden is the next president, God forbid, he has promised that Chris Coons is going to be his Secretary of State. So we'll finally be rid of that miserable, bald-headed twerp, Chris Coons.
You won't be able to see him in most official portraits or.
No, he doesn't get up that high.
Foreign leaders, but
yeah. Actually, his gut is probably bigger than he is in height. In other words,
do you know him personally?
I met him a couple of times. He doesn't like me because I accused him of stealing Christine O'Donnell's road signs. I got him on the record to deny he did it, because he never denied on the record he did it. So last year I cornered him at an event, And I got him to say on the record that he didn't do it when we have witnesses that saw him do it. And, hopefully someday he'll pay the price for that. But Chris Coons is not, the conscience of the Senate that he portrays himself to be, especially when he goes on Fox News and says, "Hey, I'm Mr. Democrat, and I want to work with the Republicans." He doesn't want to work with anybody but himself.
Right. He would be right there with the rest of them voting to pack the court and add states.
Oh, he already said it. He's already said it. He wants to pack the court. So is that somebody that the Republicans are going to challenge when he comes up for confirmation? We shall see, won't we? William, it has been a tough week. I don't know about you, but this week is going to be very interesting as well. Let us, if we can, maybe we can get together and do a joint podcast within the next couple of days, kind of update our viewers as to what we think, what's happening, because I know there's so many out there that really do value our opinion, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do that.
Excellent.
Al, for Bill Colley in Twin Falls, Idaho, I'm Jake Smith on the Delmarva Peninsula, where it's a beautiful 72 degrees today. Not sure what the weather is there in Idaho, Bill, but we will talk to you very soon, my friends. The only thing I can say is don't give up hope. God has heard our prayers. God knows our fears, and we may have to go through some more pain before we see God's blessing being granted again to this nation. But we should not lose sight of the fact that God is always in control. Everything is providential. Everything happens for a reason. Keep praying. You agree, Bill?
Absolutely. I was reading the letter from Archbishop Vigano and realized he's spot on.
Yes, agreed. And let's hope that he's the next pope. You know what? He best may be the pope of the next Catholic Church. If it surfaces here in the United States, he may be our next pope. He's acting more like the pope than the pope is. But with that, for Bill Colley in Twin Falls, Jake Smith here on the Delmarva Peninsula. Have a great day. We'll be back as soon as we can with another Boardwalk Potatoes dual broadcast. So thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you very soon.